zu dieser sehr kurzfristig eingeladenen Unterhaltung mit Garry Kasparov. I'll switch into English. We will do the whole event in English. So I'm very glad, Garry, that you could make it, coming from the Munich Security Conference. We would like to discuss with Garry three interrelated topics. And I guess there's no need to introduce him here. Lengthily, you all know him not only as former chess champion and probably the man with the highest IQ I ever met, and this is, of course, today's character as one of the most prominent and outspoken representatives of the Russian democratic opposition. He is one of the founding members of the Russian Anti-War Committee and of the Russian Action Committee, which is a kind of platform to unite the, I would say, anti-Putin, pro-democracy and pro-Ukraine opposition in Russia and in exile. So coming back to my previous remark, we want to discuss three interrelated topics. The first one is, of course, we would like to hear from Garry a personal and political comment on the death of Alexei Navalny. And, of course, the question, how should Western governments, Western democracies answer? How should they react? The second one is the state of the Russian democratic opposition and how to strengthen and also, I would say, to legitimize the Russian democratic diaspora by Western democracies, supporting the emergence of a kind of alternative Russia in exile. And the third one is how should the West deal with Putin after all what was happening and is still going on, the war and aggression against Ukraine, the massive war crimes, the assassination of political opponents, and the fake elections, the fake presidential elections in March. There's a very interesting document. You can, if you didn't see it, you can take it after our conversation. It's a call to delegitimize Putin, not to recognize him after the elections in March, not to recognize him as a legitimate representative of Russia, and of course not to see him any longer as a potential partner for the Western democracies. So a lot of stuff. Without further ado, Garry, I would like to ask you to give us kind of initial statement, lay out your thoughts and ideas, and then we will have a lively discussion with a very distinguished audience, a lot of Russia experts here in the room.
Rolf, thank you very much for having me, just giving me this opportunity to address this distinguished audience. All three issues you raised, of course, are connected, so intertwined. And in heart of all these problems is Putin's criminal regime. And Putin as a spider in the center of this web. And it's not just about Russia. It's, you look around the world and we understand that it's as before, we are facing the same negative consequences. If the war started by an aggressive revanchist power is not stopped at early stage, it spreads. Cancer just spreads out. You don't negotiate with cancer, you cut it off. And we could see that what started with this full-blown invasion in Ukraine now spread to Middle East, and we all now are looking at potential explosion in the Far East, China, Taiwan. Few people talk about it, but we know about Maduro's plan to annex the territory of next Guyana. You may call it coincidences, and I always say that I believe in coincidences, but I also believe in KGB. And it's a global challenge of the undemocratic forces led by Putin, ideologically led by Putin. You can say that China is just is banking, but Putin is a spearhead of this attack. And it's not just about Ukraine. And by the way, Putin also made it very clear many times. It's not just about Ukraine. It's about the entire liberal world order. Because they reached an understanding. All these dictators, thugs, terrorists, from Putin to mullahs to China, Chinese communists, North Korea, Hamas, Maduros, and others, that in the world that is totally connected, it's interdependent. We're no longer can be divided by the Iron Curtain because the new struggle. They cannot simply pretend that we can coexist. There's no more coexistence. You cannot have Berlin Wall or just any other virtual wall. And the only way for them to justify the same power is to attack. The best defense of their world, which they want to preserve, is to attack, to challenge us. There are many ways of attacking. So you can come up with some fake historical digging, as Putin did, or you can have, this terrorist attacks as done throughout the Middle East. There are many ways, but the fact is that they are at war with us. And the biggest problem we're facing, we don't recognize we're at war with them. Not that they're hiding it; they're not hiding it. It's just they are as obvious as they could be. You just have to listen to Vladimir Putin. You have to listen to Hamas leaders. Or to Maduro, or to North Korea. So they all are telling us exactly what they're going to do. And that's another problem of us not ignoring historical lessons. It's kind of a paradox that dictators, they always lie what they have done, but very often they're telling us exactly what they're going to do. We're in Germany. We can just go back to 1925 when the infamous book was published. So people looked at Mein Kampf as, big deal. It was a blueprint. But it was, in 1925, you could say that very few, if any, believed that the leader of the small nationalistic party could be a ruler of Germany and eventually, just started the global war. But when Vladimir Putin made his statements, like the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century, direct translation from Russian, back in 2005. He was already president of Russia, man who controlled both nuclear power, nuclear warheads, and also one of the largest financial empire at the world at the time, already in 2005. And he was not secretive about his plans to use this power to restore the old glory. I'm not sure he knew exactly what kind of glory, because you listen to Putin, it's very eclectic. So whether it's Byzantine Empire, whether it's Golden Horde, whether it's Tsars, but it's Soviet Union, it's a mediocre student of history who just, who is enjoying the fact that everybody has to listen to him when he opens his mouth. You saw his lecture with Tucker Carlson. So, but the problem is, it's all about bringing us to the world where might is right. And the latest tragedy, tragic news we received from Russia, of course, it's not a death. It's technically it's death biologically, but it's a murder. So by legal terms, I think it's while we still don't have all the facts, but the moment the news was received, I was in Munich, and I said that even if it's not murder, just committed by poisoning or just doing something that accelerated the process, the very fact that Navalny, who was emaciated and spent years in prison and hundreds of days in solitary confinement, was sent to one of the most northern Russian prisons, beyond Arctic Circle, in winter. I mean, that's already, it's kind of, just a message that he's not going to survive. Why it happened, and the news were announced at the day, just at the opening of Munich Security Conference. Again, coincidence. But I already said, yes, we don't have full data. But as I said it in my Twitter and my Wall Street Journal article, it was, Putin failed to kill Navalny quickly and in secret. He killed him in slow motion in public. And if we say it's a coincidence caused by KGB action, then there's only one rational explanation. It's a message to the world: screw you. Look what I can do. And by the way, it's also a message to other fellow dictators: kill them. Nothing will happen. What's happened? Nothing happened. Exactly as Putin thought. 3 years ago, Biden said, if Navalny would die in prison, there will be devastating consequences. Did you hear what he said? No, he didn't say. He mumbled. Something like, he already paid the price for murder. Okay, this is nonsense. And when people compare what we're facing today with the 1930s, it was very popular. We're in Munich, and Munich was a symbol of appeasement. I say, no, it's wrong. Yes, we all know that Chamberlain and Daladier, they were wrong in Munich. They made mistakes. But remember 1938. They were leaders of the countries that still had memories of the Great War, World War I. Nobody wanted to fight. And also the balance of power. America was total isolationist, didn't want to hear about it. You had Britain and France, okay, two empires, still very powerful, but facing Germany, Italy, fascist Italy. Stalin was, you couldn't count on Stalin, and Japanese empire rising there. The balance of power, economic and military, was totally different. What's happening now is there is an overwhelming military and economic advantage of the free world. And also I would say political. Why I say political? Because unlike in the 20th century, dictators today, they always use our vocabulary. You talked about this sham elections. They want to say elections, human rights. Chinese foreign minister in Munich spent 20 minutes lecturing us about Israeli genocide in Gaza. It's just insane. It's just set aside, the Israel-Palestinian problem. This is the man who just represents the country that is committing the most heinous crimes, it's genocidal crimes since World War II, genocide of Uyghurs. And he's sitting there lecturing us, and the moderator didn't bother to actually tell him, why don't you shut up and talk about Uyghurs? And you had people, why don't we bring Uyghurs into the audience? Just to ask, can we just start talking about real genocide? So and that's, as I said, it's all comes to the same problem. They are at war with us, and again, they use all the right words. They use, ironically, things that invented in the free world have been effectively used against us. So we have to say that their activities online, they are far more effective. Look at TikTok, for instance, controlled by Chinese, or the whole fake news industry that has been developed by Putin's people, and it does work. And my impressions, as you can guess, from Munich, they were not positive. I think it's very depressing. And going back to Navalny's death is just, we saw nothing that could can honor the man who sacrificed his life for certain ideals that allegedly we all believe in. And again, it's not that they have nothing to offer. Instantly they could have done a few things. So there are 4 areas where they could immediately hit. One is arm Ukraine. American president could say attackers will be sent immediately. Same could be down here in Germany. You're still sitting on the missiles that can destroy the Kremlin Bridge, which by the way may be the decisive factor of the war, which is main logistical supply to Russian troops there. Economic, $300 billion. I'm not sure that the amount, but it's insane amount compared to the few $billion here and there that's being discussed. So this money, which is sitting under control of Europeans and Americans, could be confiscated because it's a wartime. You need consensus. You have to scratch their head. You have to respect the law. You don't win the war by respecting the law, because the war is already a violation of the laws that were done in peacetime. So the whole idea that Europe cannot move without consensus, yes, but the consensus was built during peacetime. If you're facing the enemy that is violating the law, you have to do certain things that will help you to advance your cause. The message to Putin should be very simple. Hungary stands on the way, kick them out. We cannot do that with consensus. Fine, that's why we're losing the war. That's why we're losing the war. War means you do things that are sometimes even unthinkable in peacetime. But to do that, you have to recognize we are at war, and we're not at war. Okay, the Baltic nations and the Poles and Finns, they understand we are, because they have genetic memory. The rest of Europe, not so much. Americans, yeah. So, second was this finance. Then economic. You can confiscate assets and impose sanctions upon those oligarchs that are just active everywhere. And the fourth one, political. That's easy. Do not recognize Putin as a legitimate president. Yeah, that's a problem, because you don't recognize how you deal with them. They don't deal with them. The only way to deal with them is to destroy his armies there. And Ralph said, you know, we have to unite opposition, so which is pro-Russian and pro-democracy and pro-Ukrainian. I don't want to say we're pro-Ukrainians, though I did a lot, just helping Ukraine, raising funds, and we're pro-Russian, but we believe that the future of Russia depends on the outcome of war in Ukraine. So that's why the Russian Action Committee motto is very simple. Victory for Ukraine, freedom for Russia. I don't believe that Putin regime will be in any real danger until Ukrainian flag is raised in Sevastopol. And any delay, any negotiation, any compromise that is just being discussed, contrary to what is being said in public, there are many negotiations going on with Putin's cronies about not ending the war, but just about finding a formula that could face-saving formula for Russia not to win, as they say, and it's strengthens Putin's position, and of course it sends a message to other dictators and thugs around the world that, you know, if you are arrogant enough, if you are willing to take certain risks, so you will be rewarded, because the Western powers that have so much power, huge resources, military, economic, they are not willing to use them. You don't win the war by presenting your GDP. I heard many times say, look, Ukraine has many friends, thousands of friends, and our GDP, combined GDP, is 25 times the size of Russian allies. Okay, China, set China aside. Yes, now if your GDP is 25 times larger, how come that the Russians can fire 6 times more shells every day? How come that North Korea gave more shells to Russia than the entire Europe? I mean, there's something wrong. And the statements that coming from politicians like, you know, your Minister of Defense, we have to prepare for the war against Russia in 2025. The way Putin reads it, Ukraine is written off. Because you don't prepare for the war against Russia unless Ukraine lost. Because as long as Ukrainians are holding Russian armies, Russia cannot threaten other countries. And of course, if Russia is defeated there are no more threats. So I can tell you there's a very simple way to prevent this threat. So it's like policy of deterrence. Help Ukraine win the war. You have a unique opportunity to execute the plan, or the main idea why NATO was invented at first place back in 1949, to save free Europe from Russian aggression. At that time, the theater of war would be the River Rhine. Today it's River Dnieper, but the principle is still the same. And the whole debate about Ukraine joining NATO and this is we can't admit it because of war. It's to me it's preposterous for a simple reason. Ukraine is fighting the very war NATO was built for. NATO was not built for just, you know, police operation in Afghanistan or Iraq. It was built for one purpose only, to stop Russian aggression. And all you have to do is give them weapons that are collecting dust on your storages. Americans gave Ukraine 31 Abrams tanks. There are more than 2,000 tanks collecting dust in California desert. I don't know how many missiles, attackers, hundreds. F-16s are no longer used by Pentagon. There are definitely hundreds, if not thousands of them. So regarding ammunition, they say we don't have enough shells. America already gave some cluster ammunition, which is not used by NATO, by law. There are more than 4 million in total. I bet, I'm speculating, but I bet many of them, maybe a couple of millions, here in Germany. Why not in Ukraine? So you don't need U.S. Congress to authorize it. It's all about political will. It's
because
all about
they are all almost as frightened of a Russian defeat than from a Russian victory.
Okay, that's the. We are having people that live in a world that is still, being judged by the Cold War standards. As I said, it's a Kissinger's geopolitics that has three key elements: Washington, Moscow, and Beijing. And unfortunately, those who are making calls for American foreign policy, they still see the world through the same lenses. So the way they see it, Ukraine wins, Russia loses, Putin goes down, Russia collapses, China is getting stronger. Now, while I don't think this logical chain is forced one, but if you are looking for certain outcomes, you should consider what could be the alternative. The alternative is Putin continues the war. So they are willing to consider seriously the Putin's war against NATO. They're now helping Ukraine to win. Again, you may call it insanity. They say we fear escalation. Putin always escalates for a simple, because that's the way dictators never ask why. It's about why not. So if he believes he can do that, he will do that. And now this is the murder of Navalny is a demonstration that nothing happens. So. And that's why it's like license to kill. So there will be more attacks in Ukraine, and again, God knows what comes next. Oh, by the way, yesterday I saw some tragic news from Spain. Did you see that? Yeah, the pilot they can operate anywhere. Yeah. It's a powerful message. So you betray our country, we'll find you anywhere. Nobody will defend you. So I bet you that the Spanish police, they should know who did it, and it again demonstrate that how that you're serious. Start destroying Putin's spy networks and lobbyists across Europe. Again, we are at war. Simply recognize this fact. And just wrapping up my presentation, that's what Ralph mentioned. Is this the Navalny's death? Murder but death. This is symbolic because it shows that nothing will happen in Russia as long as Putin stays in power. Because you don't expect, the few brave Russians, even a few thousand, even maybe, I would say probably a few million Russians that are not willing to live under Putin. They can change anything. So Putin's regime is a war machine, and expecting change from inside is as naive as expecting change in Germany in 1943, for instance. You need military defeat before it happens. What we've been suggesting is that to recognize a simple reality, that you have to create an alternative Russia outside. It's not a government in exile. That's what I always tell people. We're not pretending we can speak on behalf of 140 million people. But we have already millions of Russians outside of Russia. We have potentially the equal number, if not more, inside Russia that are not willing to live under Putin. All you have to do is to make sure that that these people will have a chance to move elsewhere. As we say, this is half jokingly, that you have to start saying in 5 seconds without stuttering, the worst criminal, regime legitimate crime is Ukraine. The moment you say that, you can be admitted to a civilized world. Of course, it's a bit bigger. The declaration, by the way, signed in Berlin last year, presented by our group, so that's listed all the key things that people have to sign and admit. And each of them make them automatically criminal in Putin's Russia. So what you can do is if there's a political will and strategic thinking, you can start, presenting it as the what I call virtual Taiwan, just to make sure this is not, China, virtual Taiwan. why it's important is not just, psychological or moral. It's actually the best contribution to the war, because while Putin's regime found ways to go around sanctions, sanctions is 12 packages, 13 packages. Yeah, Germany doesn't do export to Russia. Okay, it goes to Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, and then back to Russia. Maybe not back to Russia. Probably stays on the way, so that it's being lost while being transported. So we look at the trade, the booming trade in Central Asia, and we recognize that even the countries that are most aggressive in their support of Ukraine, like Estonia, Finland, they cannot stop the business of operating for a simple reason: we are not at war. And of course, Americans and Canadians, everything does the same. Ukrainians demonstrated many times that 70 to 80% of technical details in the Russian drones are foreign made. So basically nothing that you cannot stop it, because again it's business and we're not at war. But there's one element of Putin's war machine that he cannot replace: brains. And it's, while we can recognize that Putin can mobilize millions of people to fight the war, the cannon fodder, so the records, he cannot replace engineers and computer experts. By the way, this is the audience that is most sensitive to what's happening. Their problem is they cannot leave Russia, even if they want. They're no longer welcome. So Russian passport is like a curse, and I understand why. But start thinking about creative ways. What we suggest, it's a virtual state. Offer them a chance to sign a declaration and get out. So that's the biggest blow to Putin's war machine. You need maybe 500,000 people to leave, and missiles, finances, all these schemes how to go around sanctions. These things can be in real danger, because again, recruits from God knows where, they cannot do the job that can be conducted only by experts. So those are many things that we would like to discuss, but we have to find partners that are serious about winning the war. And that brings us to the final point: it's what is the outcome of the war? I used to play chess, so that's why and it's whether it's chess or any other game or a business or politics, you have a goal, and when you declare the goal, you start bringing resources to achieve it. We still don't hear from Western politicians what is the goal of war in Ukraine. What is a strategic goal? For me, it's very simple. Ukraine must win. 3 words. Ukraine must win. As for leaders, I hate this word, leaders. Yeah, it's always, we will stay with Ukraine as long as it takes. Nothing. I even joke that you can easily add, we stay with Ukraine as long as it takes for us to cut the deal with Moscow. I can add whatever I want. So we should not let Russia win. No, that's not. You don't play the war for a tie. You don't fight the war. It's about winning. And Ukraine must win. Russia must be defeated. One of the Ukrainian MPs asked Borrell in Munich, "Can you say that Europe wants Russia to be defeated?" He hasn't answered. He pretended he didn't hear the question. So that's a problem. So we have to start recognizing that as long as Putin stays in power, there will be war, and the war will spread around the world, and regime change should stop being an anathema as it today.
Thanks a lot, Garry, for that passionate statement.